So this is Khoodeelaar Television Channel, broadcasting under the banner of the Baby Angel Geronimo Editions. This broadcast is beginning at 22:55 GMT, which is 23:55 UK time, and we are going to focus in this edition on the first day of the High Court trial that began in the London High Court in the collective kind of case that is being identified by mentioning Harry Windsor as the claimant, but there are other claimants as well, and the defendants being the Associated Newspaper Group, which owns and controls and publishes the Daily Mail, the Mail on Sunday, and the Mail Online, plus Rupert Murdoch's Scum newspaper, Daily Scum, and even the Daily Mirror. Now, Harry Windsor was in the High Court where he appeared during Monday as a surprise because he didn't allow the lying press paparazzo to know about his appearance. So he went to the High Court as a surprise and was only photographed and filmed as he appeared in the vicinity of the High Court in London, the Strand in London. Now, I have been on a daily basis, I have been examining newspapers starting in the late 1950s. So if you look at 40 years, the 60s, the 70s, the 90s, and the 2000s, and then 23 years, so 63 years, plus if you add another 3 years, it's 7 decades of active investigation into the contents and the role and the impact of the newspapers. By newspapers, because of the imperialistic position that the British newspapers, the Western newspapers, especially the British ones, the English language ones, occupy, despite the fact that the so-called empire, in the case of the subcontinent, in the case of Pakistan, India, and Bangladesh, the so-called British Raj has, quote, ended in August 1947. The intellectual reign and imperialism not only has not ended, it has actually increased. So, in addition to what Harry Windsor's claims are bringing to focus, the real impact and the real influence and the real role played by the lying Fleet Street is in the deterioration of the lives and the qualities of lives of the people of the subcontinent, the so-called former colonies, and the people of the former British colonies across the continent of Africa. And the fact that the South Africa, which is post-apartheid, it is apparently, it is still as corrupt and as culturally corrupted by the infection of imperialistic distortion of meaning and misrepresentation and misinformation. So all of these things took place and have been taking place way before the advent of the internet and the so-called concepts of misinformation. To me, misinformation is not news. And everything that has been alleged against the Associated Newspapers, which is the biggest of the offenders in the hacking and in the employment of literally hundreds of informants, private detectives, spooks into the private life of Harry Windsor. And that actually took place long before Harry Windsor even heard of Meghan Markle, let alone met her or they got married, etc., etc. So, what I think in the main topic today, what is happening is that Harry Windsor, despite the fact that the Daily Mail persistently has been kind of demonizing Harry Windsor and Meghan Markle, of course, but despite the daily demonization of Harry Windsor by the Daily Mail and the Sun and their followers in the Fleet Street, the less widely circulated titles, this demonization has been motivated by the intention to discredit, the aim to discredit Harry Windsor. Why? Not because he is violating human rights, not because he is violating universal rights or freedom of people. It is because they know that if his claims against the Daily Mail and this come and the Daily Mirror actually end up being tried instead of being settled out of court, then all the secrets and all the lying operations that the Daily Mail profits from, engages in, indulges in, will come out. And that will blow, definitively blow the cover and expose the Daily Mail, which appeased the fascists of Germany in 1930s and is still a fascistic organ, the most powerful fascistic tabloid media organization in the whole Western world. Nobody has actually touched them. Because although the Levison inquiry 2011 was held, it was inconclusive because the Levison 2 was due to be held shortly afterwards, after the end of the Levison 1. But it hasn't happened. And during Monday, that is 27th of March 2023 in London, there are people talking about the timing and the actual holding of the Levison 2, because that would include a lot of follow-ups. What I'm doing here in this commentary is immediate, almost as contemporaneous, simultaneous, kind of big bulletin topics or big bullet topics, not extensive elaboration, examination of each concept, but just listing the concepts. What has happened is that people like Doreen Lawrence is Stephen Lawrence's mother. People like Elton John and another 4 claimants. So those 2 plus 4, 6, and then Harry is the lead name. So 7 claimants are featured in the first day's kind of news references to the event that took place in the High Court. Now, the most important thing about High Court trials or the High Court's cases is the costs. And it is estimated during the Monday, 27th of March, 2023, that if the claims actually end up in hearings being taken place, hearings being held, hearings being allowed, and Harry not being deterred to settle out of court, then the costs, the legal costs, that is, costs mainly incurred by paying licensed law traders, and the administration of the various evidence, processing of the evidence, would would be in the region of 200 to 200 plus million pounds. That is an estimate because the trial has not happened and the conclusion is yet to be, of course, realized. It is estimated also that Harry will not settle. And the reason is not a minor aspect of Harry's determination to see the evidence and air the evidence in public for the benefit of himself and many other people who have been victimized and have been victims of the Daily Mail's lying, the career of lying. And these lying and the lies have taken place over decades. In the case of Elton John, of course, I mean, the lies took place while Diana, Harry's mum, was alive, and Elton John was reportedly a close friend of Diana's. So Elton John's claims against the Daily Mail and the other titles date back to before even Harry was born. So what is happening is that because of the demonization of Harry, the public standing of Harry, according to the Daily Mail, according to the Sun, has been reduced. That is the claim they make. But the substance of the claim, or the claims collectively made by the claimants and by Harry, contradict that line of propaganda. And the main fact or factual source or sources that the Daily Mail has used to discredit or dehumanize or undermine the credibility of Harry Windsor is the other side of the monarchy, either directly issued by King Brian or associated with King Brian as and leaked items coming from the monarchy. Now, the equation that the Daily Mail has created or sought to create or has sought to create is that King Brian is winning and Harry is being discredited. That is not the case at all. Because if Harry's trial actually reaches the stage of the actual hearing and the examining of the evidence, this will be historic in such a significant way that historic has not happened in relation to the monarchy or in relation to a member of the monarchy or a member of the royal family, despite the fact that Harry has decided to go to the USA and live there with Meghan and his children. Harry remains undeniably a member of the royal family. And that is a factor that has not happened when Queen Elizabeth, Brenda's father, ousted his brother because his brother actually was the king and he was the one that would have been king and not Queen Elizabeth's father. That ousted king who settled in France with his American wife, American mistress Wallis, he didn't take on the Fleet Street. He didn't take on the equivalent of the Fleet Street in the 1930s, as Harry is doing today in 2030, the third decade of the century. The comprehensive, the extensive, and the detailed nature of the claims, the contents, and the data and the information are far more in terms of volume in the quantity than anything that can be found in any kind of match through the legal bureaucracy between the media and anybody who has been victimized and been the victim of the media. So, if this goes to trial and a trial actually begins, then that will be a serious cause for serious anxiety and concern for the criminals who are mainly the decision makers, the executives, and the proprietors of these outlets. For example, such was the heat, such was the heat generated during the Levison 1 hearing against the role played by the News of the World, that Rupert Murdoch, who owned the News of the World, actually scrapped the News of the World because such was the public contempt generated by the evidence emerging of the tactics used by the News of the World in not only spying on Millie Dowler after her murder, but the general public sympathy in support of Millie Dowler was such that Murdoch could not sustain the other titles that he owns, which is the Times, the Sunday Times, the Scum. So, in order to keep the other titles going, Murdoch decided, technically correctly, to scrap the News of the World. What he has done is to replace the News of the World on the Sundays by the title created to replace it, called the Sun on Sunday. And the other thing he has done about the News of the World is that he has dropped carrying on the News of the World, the replaced News of the World that is called Sun on Sunday, the sleazy, the pathetic kind of completely over pornographic kind of stories and contents that the News of the World actually capitalized on, exploited, and made huge sums of money by promoting. So moral lesson, the moral lesson that has been long overdue in the United Kingdom to be drawn about the role of the tabloid newspapers, and by extension, by that same agenda being followed by the non-tabloid ones, is that the press, contrary to the claim it makes, the British press, that it is the ultimate platform for free speech. Contrary to that, not only is it not the ultimate platform for free speech, it is the ultimate deterrent to Fleet Street. And it only ever recognizes free speech and human rights when those pretend subscription to those values serves its own vested interests, the corrupt interests, like happened on Monday, because the legal team representing the Associated Press, the Daily Mail, at that stage, at least temporarily, were granted permission to not be forced to disclose the names of journalists that are implicated in the case. And how did they do it? The lying, corrupt, racist criminals at the Daily Mail lead the campaign against the human rights legislation. And they decided to invoke the very same legislation the human rights to keep secret the names of the criminals that operate as journalists. So this is just an introductory comment and commentary on the day one of the court process that began in the London High Court. What happens with this is a privacy action, so it has to be, by definition, initiated and held at the higher court, which is where the proceedings commenced on Monday, the 27th of March 2023. The Khoodeelaar campaign will, of course, continue to cover all the key substantive aspects of the program that the claimants have begun. And we shall be doing that in every edition that we broadcast. And let's check on the other latest issues that are due for updates in this edition. So there is 5 hours ago, it seems that there is a post on the online Independent. Tory PR warns passing buck on British IS suspects risks terrorist breeding ground. And it says revoking nationality of Shamima Begum is a form of capital punishment. This has been the statement attributed, let's see, attributed to who? Stripping alleged militants of their British citizenship and leaving them in refugee camps rather than bringing them back to face trial threatens to create a breeding ground of terrorists tomorrow. Tory former Chancellor Norman Lamont has warned. That is, let's check what was the actual. So it's Norman Lamont who has been quoted by the Independent Online, that is Independent Co UK. Let's check we shall reach the actual copy. So the role of the actual British media has been persistently against democracy, against accountability, against transparency, against independence of the colonies, so called. The extrapolation, that is, application of the same principle on the lives of ordinary people in Britain, the so called Britons, which is itself a distortion. Because even the most over patriotic Briton, like Pierce Moron, have confessed that in their DNA there is not a single signature of English DNA. So, by definition, the demography, that is UK, England mainly, in terms of the number of people, is by definition international in background, in origin, in derivation. So, therefore, Rishi Sunak, Suella, Ivila, Cruella, Braverman, and ugly Priti Patel. Look at these. These all three of them are Indian origin or descendant of Indian origin, parentage, ancestors. And these are the three that are carrying out what the National Front, the British movement, and other anti migrant racists, white racists, would love to be able to do, but cannot be done, cannot be allowed to do because their whiteness can be cited as proof that they are prejudiced. But when the same agenda is done by Indian origin occupants in the UK state offices, like Rishi Sunak at number 10, Suella Ivila Cruella Braverman at the Home Office, that is the Interior Department Ministry in the United Kingdom, and her predecessor in post, the ugly Priti Patel. They cannot be accused. Why? Because the assumption is, which is wrong, but that is the assumption that is based entirely on the brainwashing condition of the majority of the people that are counted, that they are themselves of Asian or Indian or Hindu backgrounds, despite the fact that Suella Braverman is said to be a Brahmin kind of practice, Buddhist practice, her actual ancestry is traceable to Hindu origin, of course. Now that is a contradictory kind of explanation. For example, as we found in the campaign against the racists at the Stratford School in 1992, the people who were being attacked by the Pleasted media and the mainstream as being troublemakers against the racist head teacher and snide cause of education and the rights of the parents and the guardians. And the majority of the parents were represented who had a child at the school as a pupil of the school at the time, which is how he ended up becoming a parent governor. But two factors among the parents in connection with the Stratford School governing body were chosen by the mainly anti-Muslim Fleet Street, who isolated the Hindu one, who became overly critical of the governors, the parent governors, and the woman, Afro-Caribbean backgrounded woman, who was found later to be living in Birmingham. Those two were cited by the Fleet Street anti-Muslim media as being critical of the majority of the governing body, which was represented by the chair, Ghulam Rasul Shahida. This is what is happening now. And all this goes back to the 19th century, when the so-called British philosopher Thomas Babington Macaulay devised his Indian education programs, which he justified by explaining as a tool, as a project that would produce among, he used the color, brown skinned people, externally looking brown and Indian, but internally so brainwashed that they would, without realizing it, they would be completely brainwashed and groomed without realizing that grooming and brainwashing, they would act as automatic reproducers and degenerating propagandists for the narrative of England-based racism and hostility against the people of the subcontinent. Remember the hostile environment? Theresa May only, because of the racist ignorance and the choice to perpetrate racism and racist ignorance and denial of the role played hundreds of years ago, there has been no mention even by the Guardian, not even by Amelia Gentleman. Is it Amelia Gentleman? Who is married to Boris Johnson's brother Joe Johnson, but who works as a rare kind of occurrence as an investigative writer at The Guardian. Amelia Gentleman was given the Paul Foot Prize for her alleged investigation into the treatment of the Windrush generation by the British government. It was in the course of her so-called investigation into the treatment of the Windrush generation that it became established that while Theresa May was in post as the Home Secretary under David Cameron, she, Theresa May, ordered the introduction of an illegal, brazenly racist environment in the country, in the attitude of the government towards the people of the Windrush generation and their descendants, called hostile environment. She ordered the creation of a hostile environment. Of the term hostile and the phrase hostile environment, based on the lead word hostile, can be found in the thinking of Thomas Babington Macaulay. And then afterwards, the thinking of Winston Churchill and other leaders of the governments in the United Kingdom can be linked to the intention to create hostile attitude against the people of the subcontinent, Hindus, Muslims, whatever. And in the actual content that the Thomas Babington Macaulay wrote, he mixed up and he treated as the same Arabic, Persian, and Sanskrit languages and the traditions of the three linguistic traditions. Not only that, Babington was so stupid, so ordinarily describable as stupid, that he said that the combined contents of the Hindu, Sanskrit, Arabic, and Persian literature was worth less than the contents of a shelf in a good Western library. How stupid! How stupid! Now, this is not long after, well, he died in the 19th century, but not even 50 or 60 years after that, after his death, that is Macaulay's death, the British interests successfully lobbied for the awarding of the Nobel Prize as a symbol of recognition of the quality of literature that Tagore represented. Now, I am a keen student of Rabindranath Tagore. I'm not a fan of Rabindranath Tagore because of the role that Tagore played in terms of the British Empire as compared to the role played by the revolutionary and uniquely powerful and moral poet Qazi Nazrul Islam. But that's a side issue. The main kind of recognition of Tagore, in my view, has to be based on his contributions. Tagore possessed various qualities: philosophical, intellectual, moral, and his abilities to be found in one single individual are very rare indeed. And I am totally, absolutely, consistently full of admiration for Tagore's contribution about what a library means. Let's see if I can trace that, bring up that particular contribution. The first paragraph is worth reciting or reading every time. This is the paragraph that I like to read as a substantive and substantial kind of contribution or proof of the powerful philosophy and universality of thought that Rabindranath Tagore brought to this piece. মহাসমুদ্রের শতবৎসরের কল্লোল কেহ যদি এমন করিয়া বাঁধিয়া রাখিতে পারিত যে সে ঘুমাইয়া পড়া সৃষ্টির মতো চুপ করিয়া থাকিত, তবে সেই নীরব মহাশব্দের সহিত এই লাইব্রেরির তুলনা হইত. Now that is actually a phenomenal statement to make. Absolutely phenomenal and truthful. And then the next sentence. এখানে ভাষা চুপ করিয়া আছে, প্রবাহ স্থির হইয়া আছে, মানবাত্মার অমর আলোক কালো অক্ষরের শৃঙ্খলে কাগজের কারাগারে বাঁধা পড়িয়া আছে. Now, in that second sentence, Tagore actually includes both positive and negative, both the dark and the enlightened, or the darkening and darkness and the enlightenment. And the first one is, of course, the preamble, the universal preamble. মহাসমুদ্রের শতবৎসরের কল্লুল কেহ যদি এমন করিয়া বাঁধিয়া রাখিতে পারিত না. মহাসমুদ্র is the Pacific. And how can anyone quantify even a moment's ripples, waves in the Pacific, let alone 100 years of noise and kollul and movement in the Pacific? And then reduce it apparently to such a simple imagery, ঘুমাইয়া পড়া শিশুটির মতো চুপ করিয়া থাকিত. How can that happen? It cannot happen. But that's the capacity of imagination and description that Tagore possessed. And it represented the truth. সেই নীরব মহাশব্দ, that is completely amazing. নীরব মহাশব্দ, how can that মহাশব্দ be silent as well? এই লাইব্রেরির তুলনা হইত. That is absolutely true. Now, although many of the libraries that exist in the United Kingdom today, let's say 28th of March 2023, most of the local councils that at one stage used to be pleased to fund local libraries are reducing the funding and operations of the libraries. Now, this is happening in 2023. And the fact that it is happening is not a minor event, it's a major event. It's a major proof that United Kingdom, in England, which is demographically the lead population of the United Kingdom, there is literally degeneration taking place. Degeneration of the people who are reduced to be increasingly ignorant, backward, ill-informed, and ill-educated and ill-schooled. I mean, the phrase that Matthew Paris, a former Conservative MP, born in Rhodesia and an arch-racist liar, but he has used a phrase in his column, if memory serves, on the 28th of February 2023 in the Times. It was probably Saturday because he has got two columns every week. And one is definitely carried on the Saturday edition of the Times. He described Boris Johnson as the dog mess on Britain's pavement. Let's check where this appeared. Where meaning what date? Well, his latest column, Matthew Paris, has published in the Times this Saturday, last Saturday, is that Boris should leave the United Kingdom and go on exile. He said, Boris, exile is the best bet. Let's check if we can find the column that contained the description of Johnson as the dog mess. All right, let's check another route to see if we can retrieve that item. I'm looking for the piece that Matthew Paris wrote in the Times on a Saturday, in which Matthew Paris correctly described Boris Johnson as dog mess on Britain's pavement. I'm looking for the item as a column written by Matthew Paris. Paris is spelled Parris, and published in the Times on a Saturday, the last Saturday of the month, February, in which column Matthew Paris condemned Boris Johnson in the words that I'm looking for. The words that he used was that Boris Johnson was a dog mess on Britain's pavement. And this Saturday, last Saturday, the same Matthew Paris wrote the piece advising Johnson to leave the United Kingdom and go on an exile. This has followed the appearance, Boris Johnson's appearance before the Privileges Committee of the House of Commons on the Wednesday, last Wednesday, in which Boris Johnson performed very badly, his worst performance, and and exposed as a shallow visual rather than the mythological classic scholar. So let's find another route to checking if we can trace the actual column that Matthew Paris published on the Times, condemning Boris Johnson as the dog mason. So was it, have I got this wrong? Instead of 28th of February, it may be that it was published on the 28th of January. Okay. No, not that piece because that was last year. But he actually, Matthew Paris, kind of mocked and ridiculed Liz Truss as well, as effectively as he did Boris Johnson later in that column that I'm looking for. Let me. It was not in February, it was in January. So what happened? It was on the 28th of January that Matthew Paris published the comment that compared Boris Johnson right. This is what he said. I found it 28th of January. He's addressing Rishi Sunak. To survive, he, that is Rishi Sunak, and his cabinet must shake off any suggestion of continuity with Johnson's cabinet. Truss may just have been a bad dream, but Johnson was a 2019 to 2022 reality. A great steaming heap of dogmas on Britain's pavement. Rishi and his cabinet and cabinet secretary are beginning to look as if they have stepped in it, the dogmas, and are now treading it into the number 10 carpets. Do or die, Sunak must throw off those shoes that contain the dogmas Boris Johnson. Dogmas Boris Johnson meaning the claims, the plan, the plot, the agenda. So this is the language that Matthew Paris has used about Boris Johnson, and accurately. This is not in any way withdrawing or in any way forgetting the racist role and racist words and the racist bias, anti-Muslim bias that Matthew Paris is guilty of against the Muslims of Tower Hamlets, for example, because according to Matthew Paris, by not voting for Una King at the May 2005 general election for the constituency of Bethnal Green and Bow, the voters of Bethnal Green and Bow committed a crime, according to Matthew Paris. Because by not voting for Una King, they let in the voters of Bethnal Green and Bow on the 5th of May 2005. They let in George Galloway. Now, as we have said always on the facts and the evidence, that Galloway was a pretense. And any claim that Galloway makes or will ever make, or anyone who ever attempts to make a claim on his behalf or about him, saying that his election instead of the re-election of Una King on the 5th of May 2005 was anything to do with his, that is George Galloway's, honesty or political quality or anything like that. If he makes, or any of his supporters or promoters ever makes will be wrong, untruthful, unsustainable. I salvaged him, I rescued him in 2006. I rescued the liar George Git Galloway from being the target of a recall election that would most certainly have taken place if I hadn't intervened to stop it. So Galloway was only in as the MP instead of Una King because the people in the constituency decided to ditch Una King in response to her criminally responsible, anti Muslim, anti Palestinian audacity, which she expressed by challenging the voters who had been campaigning against her anti Palestinian role in the House of Parliament. Una King ignorantly and idiotically said to the electors of Bethnal Green and Bow that if they didn't like what she was doing, they knew what to do at the next election due shortly. Now, Una King obviously was as idiotic as her so called Bangladeshi advisor, the late Abdul Sadiq, who was even as grotesquely idiotic, ignorant, and stupid. Abdul Sadiq was a lifelong liar, and he pretended to be a friend. How on earth could he be a friend of somebody like Una King? Because she didn't come from the community, she had no background in the community, and there was no evidence of any existence of anyone called Una King or somebody like her in the whole of the period that Abdul Sadiq lived in Tower Hamlets. When I single handedly agreed to salvage him from being deported, I did that out of kindness. And that happened because he approached me tearfully, not once, on dozens of times over the 3 years that I campaigned for him. Abdul Sadiq broke into tears and he cried for help. I didn't need him to cry for help because my decision to help him was ethically decided on my part after I had been approached by him. I didn't know he existed. But he approached me tearfully in the middle of the road, Fieldgate Street, which I was crossing on my way back to my flat, my house, my home in New Road in 1977. So we shall be updating on Abdul Sadiq's lies and criminal career. Now, Abdul Sadiq advised the liar Una King, and everything Abdul Sadiq said politically was borrowed from somebody else. And whatever he said to Una King at the election in 2000 in May 2010 for the election to the 6th of May 2010 was wrong, because instead of talking about the constituency, instead of talking about the corruption of the local council, the corruption and misrepresentation of the people in parliament by Peter Shaw and other MPs, Abdul Salik had about few thousand copies of a leaflet printed against George Galloway. There was nothing wrong in the printing of a propaganda leaflet against a candidate that you were opposed to. But he did that, Abdul Salik did that by bringing in George Galloway's personal life, that is, his wife's and whatever. That had no appeal to the people in Tower Hamlets, no appeal in the constituency. If he had understood politics and understood the needs of the people in the community to which I had come, because he gave an undertaking to me, when I agreed to help him, I asked him, I gave him a condition which he must observe, and he promised that he would observe that condition. But being the congenital liar that he was, Abdul Salik dropped that undertaking as soon as I got him rescued from being deported. I had said to him that he, Abdul Salik, should never betray the local community and never lie to the community, never lie about the community, never misrepresent the community. But he did all of those things. He lied and he lied and he lied. Now, George Galloway, as we have chronicled in previous editions, was an ingrate. Well, he was an ingrate to the people of Bethnal Green and Bow, as he proved to be an ingrate for the people of Bradford West. And Galloway, politically, is no longer an MP, doesn't have a platform that can be remotely described as being credible, because he has been exposed as a phony. After his serial prostration at the feet of the racist, anti-Muslim liar Nigel Nasty Farage, etc., etc. We shall cover these issues and topics in due course more extensively. Going back to the dogmas that Matthew Paris described Boris Johnson as being, look at the comparison that Matthew Paris made between Liz Truss and Boris Johnson in Matthew Paris's column in the Times on the 28th of January 2023. Truss may just have been a bad dream, but Johnson was a reality. 2019 to 2022 reality. A great steaming heap of dogmas on Britain's pavement. So that is what Boris Johnson was and remains. And Truss is described, what did he describe Truss as? He said, Truss has a pinhead political brain, but planet-sized ambition. Matthew Paris could not get it more appropriate. And this criminal, adulterous liar has been allowed, based on 44 days of disgraceful stay in the post of Prime Minister, to nominate a bunch of crooks and criminals to be members of the House of Peers. How disgusting. So we may be moving for an updater note over to Pakistan, where a stupid statement calling for Imran Khan to be murdered has been made by a stupid idiot in the stupid government fronted by the crook Nawaz Sharif's younger brother. This piece in the Independent Online, byline to Namita Singh, reads Pakistan minister sparks backlash demanding Imran Khan's elimination. Now, this is the first time that a so-called member of the so-called government, fronted by this Sharif, against Imran Khan has been made. Only last week, I think, another statement made by Nawaz Sharif's own daughter, Mariam Sharif, called Imran Khan to be treated as a terrorist. Now let's check the content of this. This is Pakistan's Interior Minister Rana Sanaullah Khan has drawn backlash after making startling remarks against his political rival and the ousted Prime Minister Imran Khan. In an interview with a private channel, Sanaullah Khan, who occupies the second most important constitutional post after the Prime Minister, said, either he, Imran Khan, will be eliminated from the political arena or us. He has brought the nation's politics to a point where only one of us can exist, said Rana Sanaullah Khan. When we feel our existence is being threatened, we will go to a point where we will not bother whether a move is democratic or not. The senior leader belonging to the country's ruling Pakistan Muslim League, Nawaz PMLN, termed the cricketer turned politician incurable and blamed him for leading the country towards an anarchy-like situation, reported the Dawn newspaper. He accuses us of plotting to kill him. And if he thinks we want to kill him, obviously he wants to kill us as well. That is what Namita Singh is quoted Rana Sanaullah Khan as saying. So the coverage by the British mainstream, including the Evening Standard, the BBC, of the behavior of Luther Rahman and Tar Hamlers is corrupt. Luther Rahman is a proven crook and a liar, but the coverage of his tenure, incumbency since the 5th of May 2022 as the within quote elected mayor at the expense of Tar Hamlers is not helping the cause of democracy, because they are ignoring all the corruption that Lutheran is involved in now, perpetrating criminal negligence and disregard for safeguarding the vulnerable. The most important high profile example of Lutheraman's negligence of the safeguarding duties as owed to the children, including Shamima Begum and two of her friends, until the time they were reportedly found to have crossed into Syria in February 2015. As we have said, Lutheraman Star Hamlers Council, let's check if they've got any different kind of behavior on the website, different than what we have reported before. So we have checked on the website, contents of the website operated in the name of Tower Hamlets Council, the website being towerhamlets.gov.uk. So the result of the search of the term, the phrase Shamima Begum, the result says your search for Shamima Begum returned 0 results. So we try again. And we searched under the term Shamima, and it says your search for Shamima returned 0 results. So let's say we search for Sharmina. And it says your search for Sharmina returned 0 results, showing 0 results for Shahina. Instead it says fuck off. Now the midget, racist liar midget John Biggs, has been guilty of neglecting the safeguarding duties as owed to the children, to the same extent and the same way as Luther Rahman had done up to the period of his ouster from office by the order of the election commissioner Richard Morey on the 23rd of April 2015. And Biggs was in post following the 11th of June 2015 election that was ordered by Richard Morey until the 5th of May 2022, when Biggs was defeated at the election to the same post. But during that period, 11th of June 2015 to the 5th of May 2022, John Biggs was as neglecting of the duties Terminus Council owed to these children as Lutherman had been before. Now, although Shamima Begum is said to be aged 23 now, the ramifications, the consequences, the impact of her being robbed of her British by birth citizenship by the mental slave, the son of a Pakistani bus driver, the description of the British media corruptly love to use about him. Sajid Javid removed her citizenship in 2019. There are so many things that are direct results, direct consequences of Terminus Council failing its legal duties, safeguarding children. And there is no mention, there is absolutely no mention in what Lemon, is it Lemont or Lemant? What's his name? Let's check the correct spelling of that name of the Conservative former Chancellor. Norman Lemant. Let's check. Anyway, let's check again. Norman Lemant. So this is the Evening Standard piece. Passing buck on British IS suspects risks terrorist. This is a piece stripping alleged militants of their British citizenship and leaving them in refugee camps rather than bringing them back to face trial threatens to create a breeding ground of terrorists tomorrow. Tory former Chancellor Norman Lamont has warned. The Tory peer sounded his concerns at Westminster over passing the buck, as government was told revoking the nationality of Shamima Begum, who ran off as a schoolgirl to join the so-called Islamic State, was a form of capital punishment that has left her the breathing dead. Miss Begum was 15 when she travelled from Bethnal Green, East London, through Turkey and into territory controlled by the terror group in 2015. If every country pursues the same policy, are we not just going to build up vast insecure camps full of potential terrorists, the breeding ground of terrorists tomorrow? Her British citizenship was revoked shortly after she was found in a Syrian refugee camp in February 2019. She has been locked in a legal battle ever since. And last month, the Supreme Court continued to refuse citizenship and refused to put on trial alleged UK terrorists here in this country, that is the UK, are we not just passing the buck to other countries? Continuing the quotation, if every country pursues the same policy, are we not just going to build up vast, insecure camps full of potential terrorists, the breeding ground of terrorists tomorrow? Question mark. Responding to Lord Lamont or to the debate, and we shall come to check if we can find accessible reports on the others who spoke. Responding, Home Office Minister in the House of Peers, and we say quote because we don't use the term Lord without quotation marks, because we don't believe any human being should be called a Lord. The Pierre Murray of Blidworth said Miss Begum's citizenship had been deprived from her by the then Secretary of State Sajid Javid, and this decision had been upheld by the Special Immigration Appeals Commission SIAC in February 2023. He added, Mare, that is, I don't agree with him, that is, he doesn't agree with Norman Lamont, that there is a risk of very large camps of people being accrued who had been deprived of their nationality. In 2019, some 27 people were deprived of their nationality. In 2020, it was 10. And in 2021, it was 8. So 18 and 27. But pressing the minister, Labour Pierre Griffiths of Barry Port, Burry Port, said, statelessness is a form of capital punishment in the sense that it deprives somebody of status forever, for the rest of their lives. Is that not just the breathing dead? And shouldn't we be opposed to it on moral grounds and let circumstances dictate what happened to her if she were brought back? Leaving her where she is surely inhumane. In reply, Mare said, surely the principal interest and the principal duty of government is to keep the people safe. Now, when the likes of Mare use the term duty, what about the duty owed to Shamima Begum and Amira Abbasi and Khadija Sultana by the local council in Tar Hamlets, the Tar Hamlets Council? What had they done? Tar Hamlets Council's regimes in succession, covering the period when these three girls were brainwashed, radicalized, or groomed, whatever the actual description factually applicable. What did they do? Because at no point was there a moment of exemption from that safeguarding the children duties that Farmers Council owed. What happened? Earlier, Mare said in the House of Peers, the government was pleased, within quotation marks, of SIAC had found in favor of the government in Miss Begum's approval. Now, that is a completely false paragraph statement, because the SIAC has not found anything. Think about that. The SIAC behaved as another stooge layer, another stooge tier of the corrupt, the racist, the anti-Muslim UK judicial bureaucracy. There was no trial, there was no hearing of the actual facts about Shamima Begum. This was a kind of reference that was bureaucratically processed by this SIAC, Special Immigration Appeal Commission, a completely wholly bogus entity. But they made their kind of status even worse by admitting in their so-called opinion, which is what the most that can be said about their actual role. They said that they couldn't, according to the law, according to the alleged constitutional scope they had, they couldn't comment on Shamima Begum's rights or wrongs, because the actual decisions had been made by the Supreme Court. And the SIAC was not, in terms of being a lower tier to the Supreme Court, could not presume any right or any say questioning the role played by the stooge Supreme Court, or the stooge role played by the Supreme Court itself. And again, there is no evidence that either of the two MPs, but the main currently in place Member of Parliament for covering the area of Bethnal Green is, of course, the Bethnal Green and Bow constituency, within quotation marks, MP Roshnara Ali. She's silent. Now, Roshnara Ali herself is a complete and utter stooge of racists who trained her, brainwashed her, and even without training from the racists and brainwashing, Roshnara Ali doesn't have a background in anything ethical or moral or democratic. So she won't be doing anything remotely independent, let alone in support of observing objective standards, international standards, and values for justice, neutrality, human rights, and so on. So therefore, Roshnara Ali is a part of the corrupt bureaucracy that is supposedly a part of the democratic system. It is not. It's an emptiness. It's a void. Like the Townless Council has existed as a democratic pretense, but it has not delivered anything like democratic concern or relevance or accountability. So where would Shamima Begum internationally objectively seek recognition for their human rights, their constitutional rights, their rights as British national by birth that has been robbed of them? There is no platform that exists. And going back to the Daily Mail and the Daily Mail group and the Daily Mail website and the Rupert Murdoch scum and the so-called quality side of the newspaper business in the UK, the Times and the Sunday Times, they are not compensating for the loss of the duty that has been neglected by the local Townless Council by pointing this out for the awareness of the ordinary public about the status of Shamima Begum as a human being. The fact that it has been Norman Lamont who has made the leading comments about Shamima Begum's constitutionally tells a lot about the political depth of the Labour Party by Keir Starmer. This is an issue. The case of Shamima Begum and her school friends that actually affects all aspects of the duties owed to the citizens and ordinary people in society by the local state, by the regional state, by the central UK state, all of which have abandoned their duties. In fact, they have breached their duties, not only in relation to these three girls, plus Sharmina Begum, whose kind of treatment by Tower Hamlets Council was identical, despite the fact that she reportedly left the UK few months before these three girls were reportedly found to have crossed into Syria in February 2015. Now, none of the people who campaigned allegedly for the removal from office of Lutfur Rahman based on corruption and dishonesty centered on the May 2014 mayoral election in Tower Hamlets, they're all silent. People like Azmal Hussain is a restaurant owner in Brick Lane, who is a self-confessed avoider and thief who stole public money from Sweden to the tune of several millions. This man was paraded as a campaigner against corruption as personified by Lutfur Rahman. He is as guilty of corruption, this Azmal Hussain, as Lutfur Rahman has ever been. So there is no sound against corruption from Azmal Hussain, who was a lackey who sucked up to the midget racist John Biggs during the whole period that Biggs was in post until his ouster by election on the 5th of May 2022. What about the other individuals who are in place as councillors in Tower Hamlets Council, mainly based on the votes given to them by the people of Bangladeshi descent, Bangladeshi ancestry in Tower Hamlets? Well, they're as politically dead as they could be, and they're cowardly, and they're corrupt in collusion with the current regime fronted by Lutfur Rahman as the so-called executive mayor. They don't recognize, these councillors don't recognize Shamima Begum or Amira Abbasi or Khadija Sultana as human beings at all, let alone as being part of the Bangladeshi origin demography in the constituency as a council, as a borough of Tower Hamlets. What is happening with the criminals supporting Sikh Hasina in Bangladesh, who are the gang rapists? have not been tried, are they? They have not been tried at all. And the last reference to them, that was the rape happened in September 2020. And the reports have openly said that they belong to Sheikh Hasina's Chhatra League, the gang called Chhatra League. Now, this is now the fourth calendar year since the woman was gang raped at MC College. And there is no movement in the holding of the criminals to account by the bogus court system that is dysfunctional and voluntarily dead in Bangladesh. Now, over in Newham, which is to the east of Tower Hamlets, the lying by the regime of Executive Mayor Ruxana Fiaz, the lying continues. This is the lie that is evident on the Newham Council's website. There is a picture under which these words are written. Visit arranged for 11 Commonwealth parliamentarians to showcase how Newham is redefining London. Now, Newham is not redefining London at all, except in making Newham's administration and the council's corruption worse than it was before Roxana Fiaz succeeded the racist liar Robin Wales in May 2018. And the second line here is discussions prevailed around shared experiences, challenges, opportunities, and learnings. Now, what the fuck? It says last week, Mayor of Newham Roxana Fiaz OBE, that is a signal of her subservience to the empire, and Sir Stevens Timms. Now, Stevens with an S is the wrong spelling. Townless Council cannot even get the spelling of the name of one of the two MPs correct. Sir Stephen Timms, MP for East Ham, hosted a visit from a delegation of 11 parliamentarians from across the Commonwealth to introduce them to the exciting transformation of Newham. That is absolute pack of lies. That is an absolute pack of lies. Another pack of lies. There is no exciting transformation of Newham. This is an absolute pack of lies by Roxana Fias. We shall be talking in the next edition, not this edition, because talking about that will take more than an hour to diagnose the corrupt claims by Fias and as aided and abetted by the liar Timms, whose name is repeatedly wrongly spelt throughout the item on the website of the Newham Council. Stephen Timms is a crook, and he says blithely, I was delighted to host the Commonwealth parliamentarians to East Ham today. What the fuck for? What parliamentarian activities were going on in East Ham at any time, you fucking liar? They were all impressed. I mean, were they impressed by what they saw? What did they see? And were left in no doubt about the opportunities in Newham for local residents and businesses. Of course, Stephen Timms has not heard of the woman called Lillian John Baptiste, who died and whose mummified body was discovered in Newham several years after she died. And she died following a series of neglect by the local council, the Newham Borough Council. Is that what he is meaning? Stephen, the stupid Timms. He says the Commonwealth parliamentarians were all impressed by what they saw and were left in no doubt about the opportunities in Newham for local residents and businesses. And the visit ended with the group embarking on a tour of London City Airport and the London Design and Engineering University Technical College. This is posted on the 24th of March 2023. Fuck the lot of them. The liars. So we'll end this one at 00:53 hours GMT on Tuesday, 28th of March 2023, at just 1 hour, 57 minutes, and 41 seconds.